My
You know
stomach
you're not
hurts so
supposed to do
much.
that.
The words echoed through the marble foyer of the Harrison estate like a cry torn straight from a child's soul. 5-year-old Aaliyah Carter knelt barefoot on the polished floor. Her tiny frame bent over a half-filled bucket. A rag slipped from her trembling fingers, water dripping onto the stone like falling tears. Her curls clung damp to her forehead, her wide eyes red from both exhaustion and pain. Above her at the top of the sweeping staircase, Victoria Harrison descended like royalty, surveying her kingdom. Draped in a silk robe, a crystal glass of red wine in her hand, she carried herself with the calm cruelty of someone convinced the world revolved around her. "Finish the floor, Aaliyah," she said sharply, her voice slicing through the silence. "We're expecting guests tomorrow, and I won't have this place looking like a barn." I can't," Aaliyah whispered, rocking slightly. "Please, my stomach. It really hurts." Victoria paused mid-step. For a moment, she only sipped her wine, eyes narrowing at the little girl below. Then her lips curved into something colder than the marble underfoot. "You spoiled child," she hissed softly, almost as if savoring the words. "Do you think your tears will fool me? Pain is part of growing up. Now clean quietly." Aaliyah tried to rise, her hand clutching the staircase for balance. But Victoria's careless flick of her wrist sent the glass tumbling. Time seemed to slow. The wine spun through the air, crimson liquid scattering like drops of blood before the glass shattered on the tiles beside Aaliyah. The splash soaked her hair and shoulders. The jagged rim nicked her arm. She slipped, her head striking the floor with a dull, sickening thud. For a heartbeat, silence held the house. Then Victoria gasped, not from remorse but panic. "You made me spill it," she snapped, voice trembling. "Why couldn't you be careful?" Aaliyah's breath came shallow, her small body shivering as she tried to speak. I didn't," but the words faded into sobs. The front doors slammed open. A gust of wind swept leaves across the marble as Marcus Harrison, the billionaire patriarch, strode in unannounced. 2 days earlier than anyone expected. His charcoal coat flared behind him. His face stormed with fury before he even spoke. "What's happening here?" The scene froze. Aaliyah crumpled on the floor, wine staining her hair. Victoria standing rigid, her hand still raised from the careless gesture, the shards of glass glittering like evidence. Marcus dropped his briefcase where he stood and rushed to his daughter, gathering her gently into his arms. Her eyelids fluttered, her tiny fingers clutching his collar. "I called for you, Daddy," she whispered weakly. "But you didn't come." The words cut deeper than any wound. Marcus's jaw tightened. His eyes burned as he turned toward Victoria. "You," he said, voice low and dangerous. "What did you do to her?" And so begins the unraveling, not only of a family's fragile peace, but of a war between truth and deception, love and control. To understand how it all reached this breaking point, we must go back to the world inside the Harrison estate, where loyalty, power, and hidden resentments shaped everything to come. The silence after Marcus's words lingered like smoke in the foyer. Victoria stood frozen, her lips parting as if to explain, but the fire in his eyes warned her better. Aaliyah whimpered softly against his shoulder. Marcus carried her upstairs without another word. Each step echoed heavy as if the house itself was holding its breath. The Harrison estate loomed like a monument to success. Gilded chandeliers hung above endless hallways, marble statues lined the courtyards, and manicured gardens stretched for acres. Yet for all its grandeur, warmth was absent. The house was cold, beautiful, but hollow, like a stage set rather than a home. Years ago, things had been different. Back then, Marcus Harrison was a young programmer in a cramped Detroit apartment, staying up nights writing code while his wife Rachel hummed Motown classics in the kitchen. She would laugh every time Aaliyah, still in her baby seat, smeared applesauce across her cheeks. They had little money, but they had love, and that made their small home glow brighter than any mansion. Rachel's sudden illness changed everything. She passed when Aaliyah was barely a toddler, leaving Marcus alone with both a child and a fledgling company. He threw himself into work, convincing himself that every board meeting, every deal, every late night at the office was for Aaliyah's future. The company Harrison Global Tech grew into an empire, but as the profits soared, the laughter in the house grew faint. That was when Victoria entered his life. She was polished, refined, and from a family that carried old wealth like a badge. At charity galas, she dazzled everyone with her poise. To the outside world, she looked like the perfect match for a man of Marcus's stature. But behind closed doors, her smiles grew sharp, her patience thin. To her, Aaliyah was not a daughter, but a distraction, a reminder of the woman Marcus once loved. "You spoil her," Victoria often said, her tone dripping with disdain. Children learn strength through discipline, not coddling. Discipline in Victoria's hands meant chores too heavy for small shoulders. It meant cold dismissals when Aaliyah cried. The staff saw it, but stayed silent. Most feared Victoria's temper, or needed their jobs too badly. Only one man dared to speak quietly against it, Samuel Price, the estate's gardener. His hands were rough from decades of tending soil, his back bent from years under the sun, but his eyes carried a steadiness that Aaliyah trusted. He would sneak her fresh roses when she looked especially sad, and remind her in a low voice, "The truth always grows back, little one, even when weeds try to choke it." Victoria hated the way Aaliyah clung to Samuel's kindness. "She'll never grow strong if you baby her," she snapped once, but Samuel only tipped his cap and returned to the garden. Now, as Marcus sat beside his daughter's bed that night, brushing damp curls from her forehead, memories of Rachel's warmth weighed against the icy reality of the present. He had built an empire for Aaliyah, but in doing so had left her unguarded inside his own home. Downstairs, Victoria poured herself another glass of wine, her reflection in the tall windows sharp and gleaming. Her lips curled into a smile that held no warmth at all. Marcus didn't yet know how deep her ambitions ran, but soon he would. And it would begin with the smallest cracks, whispers in the hallways, rumors in boardrooms, and a child's quiet pleas, each pushing the Harrison household closer to a breaking point. The morning light slanted through the tall windows of the Harrison estate, but it brought no peace. Aaliyah sat quietly at the breakfast table, a bowl of cereal in front of her untouched. Her small hands toyed with the spoon, pushing it back and forth, as though the clink of metal against porcelain was the only thing keeping her company. Victoria entered the dining room in a tailored silk dress, heels clicking sharply against the tile. She gave the girl a passing glance, then sat opposite with her phone in hand. "Eat," she commanded coolly, not bothering to look up. Aaliyah obeyed, but her stomach twisted. Every bite felt heavy. From the head of the table, Marcus watched. He had returned late from the hospital after ensuring his daughter was stable, and the sight of her now silent, withdrawn eyes fixed on her bowl made something inside him ache. He cleared his throat. "She's not feeling well. Maybe she should rest." Victoria finally looked up, arching a brow. "Marcus, you're letting her play you. Children exaggerate. If you want her strong, don't let her hide behind excuses." The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Marcus's hand curled into a fist beneath the table, but he forced his voice steady. "She's 5 years old, Victoria. Not a soldier." Her smile was thin, practiced. "And yet soldiers are forged young. If you keep pampering her, she'll grow weak." The words hung heavy in the air. Marcus had no reply, not yet. Later that afternoon, he found himself in his study staring at the mountain of files that demanded his attention. Harrison Global Tech was preparing for a major acquisition, one that could reshape the industry. Investors expected results. The board expected stability. And yet his mind refused to leave the image of Aaliyah trembling on the marble floor. A knock at the door broke his thoughts. Samuel stepped in, cap in hand, dirt still clinging to his boots from the garden. "Sir," he said quietly, "the little one's been sitting by the fountain for over an hour. She looks lost." Marcus's chest tightened. He rose immediately, following Samuel outside. There on the stone bench by the fountain, Aaliyah sat hugging her knees, curls falling over her face. She looked up when her father approached, eyes shimmering with unspoken words. "Daddy," she whispered, "please don't leave me with her again." The plea gutted him. He knelt, brushing a curl from her cheek. "I won't. I promise." But even as the words left his mouth, doubt gnawed at him. Could he truly protect her when his world was divided between boardrooms and home? That evening, as Marcus prepared to join a video call with international partners, Victoria entered the study. She placed a folder on the desk, her tone measured, almost soothing. "You've been stretched too thin," she said. "The company needs steady leadership, someone who isn't distracted. Let me handle operations just for a while. Be with your daughter." "Isn't that what you want?" Marcus eyed the folder warily. Executive transfer forms. Her timing was sharp, her pitch rehearsed. For a fleeting moment he considered it. Wouldn't stepping back mean more time with Aaliyah? More moments to keep her safe? Victoria leaned closer, her perfume cloying. "Trust me, Marcus. I've stood by you. I can hold the company together until you're ready." His hand hovered over the pen torn. Down the hall, whispers had already begun. Staff exchanged nervous glances in the kitchen, rumors of Marcus's instability leaking into their conversations. "He's lost control," one maid muttered. "Mrs. Harrison will set things right." The cracks spread beyond the estate. In sleek downtown offices, members of the Harrison Global Tech Board traded cautious phone calls. Reports circulated of Marcus's temper, his distraction, his sudden outbursts. Investors whispered of pulling out if leadership didn't stabilize. And in the quiet of her room, Aaliyah clutched her stuffed bear, whispering into the dark, "Daddy, don't let her come back." The estate had become a stage of silent battles, Victoria pressing her advantage. Marcus pulled in two directions, Aaliyah shrinking under the weight of fear. The pressure built with each passing day, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Soon, something would have to break. And it did not with Marcus's pen on those transfer papers, but with a revelation Samuel carried in his calloused hands, a piece of truth that would shift the balance of power inside the Harrison estate. The storm didn't arrive with thunder. It came quietly tucked into the calloused hands of a man who had spent decades pruning roses. Samuel Price knocked gently on Marcus's study door late one evening. The billionaire was seated at his desk, head in his hands, the unsigned transfer papers spread before him. His pen rested nearby as if mocking his hesitation. Sir Samuel said softly, stepping inside, "Before you sign anything, there's something you need to see." Marcus straightened, frowning. "What is it?" The gardener reached into his worn jacket pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. He set it carefully on the desk, as though it weighed more than steel. "I shouldn't have kept it this long, but after what I saw in the foyer, after what happened to Aaliyah, I couldn't stay quiet." Marcus's brows knit. "What's on it?" Proof Samuel said simply. Moments later, the study was filled with sound, faint at first, then undeniable. Aaliyah's fragile voice, "Please, my stomach hurts. I can't." Victoria's reply, sharp and cold, "Cry quieter. Pain is part of growing up." Marcus's knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of his desk. Then another recording, Victoria on the phone, her voice dripping with calculation. "Once it's done, I'll have control of the trust, the foundation, all of it. He'll hand me the company himself." Marcus froze, breath caught in his throat. He slammed the laptop shut, chest heaving. The silence that followed felt heavier than the words themselves. She mocked my daughter's pain," he whispered almost to himself. "And she planned to take everything." Samuel's voice was steady. "I've served this house a long time, Mr. Harrison. I've seen storms come and go. But this one isn't weather you can wait out. She won't stop until she owns it, all your company, your home, even your little girl's peace." Upstairs, in the soft glow of a nightlight, Aaliyah stirred in her sleep. She murmured faintly, clutching her bear tighter, "Daddy." Don't let her back. Marcus sat at her bedside, brushing curls from her forehead. His daughter's words from the foyer replayed in his mind. I called for you, but you didn't come. The guilt pressed like lead on his chest. He had built an empire for her, yet left her unprotected inside the very walls of their home. No more. For the first time in years, Marcus felt clarity. He wasn't just a CEO. He was a father. And no contract, no boardroom, no empire would ever matter more than that. The next morning, Victoria swept into the sunroom with her usual confidence, expecting his signature. Instead, Marcus sat tall, his expression hard as stone. I won't be signing, he said flatly. Her smile faltered. Marcus, be reasonable. Reasonable. His voice cut like glass. You hurt my child, and now I know the truth about your plans. For a flicker of a moment, something shifted in her eyes. Surprise, then fury, quickly masked by feigned innocence. You're paranoid, she snapped. You've been working too hard, imagining shadows that aren't there. But Marcus didn't flinch. He leaned forward, his jaw set. This house is no longer yours to rule. You will not go near Aaliyah again, and soon the world will know exactly who you are. Victoria's painted smile returned thin and dangerous. You think you've won, she whispered, turning toward the door. But you've only started a war you can't finish. Her warning hung in the air like smoke. Marcus knew the battle was no longer private. What began in the marble foyer would soon explode under the brightest lights, where lies and truth would collide, and the whole world would watch. The first strike came not from Marcus, but from Victoria. 2 weeks after the incident in the foyer, headlines began to ripple across Boston's financial circles. Is Harrison Global Tech losing its grip? Whispered rumors turned into bold print. Articles spoke of Marcus's erratic behavior of an empire without a captain. They painted Victoria as the poised, capable partner ready to steady the ship. And then came the announcement, a press conference. Victoria would share her truth. Marcus sat in his study as the news broke, the flash drive Samuel had given him, still resting on the desk like a loaded weapon. He clenched his jaw. She's moving first. Samuel, seated across from him, only nodded. Then let her. Truth doesn't fear the light. The day of Victoria's event, cameras swarmed outside a rented downtown hall. She stood at the podium in a cream-colored suit, eyes glistening with carefully crafted tears. I tried, she said, her voice trembling just enough. I tried to be a good wife. I tried to be a good mother to little Aaliyah. But Marcus, he shut me out. He made me a villain when all I wanted was to love her. Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously, captivated by the story of a fragile woman wronged by a powerful man. Victoria dabbed at her eyes with lace, her expression the very image of heartbreak. By the time she finished, the crowd seemed convinced. Cameras clicked like gunfire, capturing her downcast face. But Marcus was already preparing his answer. That evening, inside the Harrison estate, the library had been transformed into a stage. Tall shelves of books framed Marcus as he sat behind a polished oak desk. Behind him hung portraits of Rachel, his late wife, and a framed drawing Aaliyah had made of the two of them holding hands under a bright sun. There was no podium, no theatrics, just a father in his own home ready to speak. When the cameras went live, Marcus leaned forward, his voice steady. You've heard her words. Now hear mine. He began with the past, how Harrison Global Tech was built from nights of hunger and hope, with Rachel humming in the kitchen while he coded in the dark. He spoke of the promise he had made to her that their daughter would always be safe, always loved. His voice faltered briefly, but he pressed on, and then he said, eyes hardening, I failed. He pressed a key, and the recordings filled the room. Aaliyah's tiny voice, please, my stomach hurts. Victoria's cold reply, cry quieter. Pain is part of growing up. Reporters in the room shifted uncomfortably. Some gasped. The next clip played Victoria's phone call. Once it's done, I want full control. The trust, the foundation, all of it. Marcus let the silence settle, then spoke again. That is the woman who claims she loved my daughter. That is the woman who poured wine on her head, forced her to scrub floors while sick, and laughed at her tears. His voice broke slightly. Aaliyah is 5 years old. She called for me and I wasn't there. That failure will haunt me forever. But I will not fail her again. The room was still. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. And then small footsteps echoed. Aaliyah entered the library clutching her stuffed bear. Samuel followed a few paces behind, but stayed at the door, allowing her to walk forward alone. She stood beside Marcus, her tiny frame dwarfed by the desk. Her voice trembled, but the microphones caught every word. She hurt me, Aaliyah whispered. She made me clean when I was tired. She laughed when I cried. She said Daddy wouldn't believe me. Tears welled in her eyes. But he does. He believes me now. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the most hardened reporters lowered their cameras, their pens stilled. Victoria had played the role of the grieving stepmother. But no script could compete with the raw truth of a child's voice. The fallout was immediate. Victoria, watching from her suite downtown, snapped. She stormed into the hall where her lawyers and allies sat frozen, the mask slipping. "You stupid child!" she screamed at the television. "You ruined everything!" But her outburst was caught on camera. One of her own assistants had been secretly recording. By dawn, the footage leaked. Days later, the real showdown came. A court hearing was convened to decide custody and address allegations. The room was packed with press investors and city officials. Victoria entered in a crimson dress, chin high, eyes sharp. Marcus arrived quietly holding Aaliyah's hand. The lawyers sparred for hours, accusations of manipulation, counterclaims of abuse, witnesses called and discredited. But nothing carried more weight than the recordings, the financial documents linking Victoria to shell companies, and the video of her unguarded outburst. Finally, the judge leaned forward, his gavel poised. This court finds sufficient evidence to deny any custody or visitation rights to Mrs. Victoria Harrison. Control of Harrison Global Tech remains with Mr. Marcus Harrison until further review, and criminal investigations into Mrs. Harrison's conduct will proceed. The gavel struck like thunder. Victoria's face twisted, the last mask falling away. She turned toward Marcus, eyes blazing. "You think this is over? I'll burn everything you love." Security stepped in, pulling her away as her words echoed through the chamber. Marcus gathered Aaliyah into his arms, shielding her from the storm of flashes and shouts. He whispered into her curls, his voice breaking. "It's over, sweetheart. You're safe now. Always." Outside the courthouse, headlines shifted within hours. Child's testimony shatters stepmother's defense. Harrison Empire saved by truth. Public opinion swung like a pendulum, crashing hard against Victoria. Investors who once doubted Marcus now rallied behind him. Staff at the estate whispered prayers of gratitude. And in boardrooms across the city, the name Harrison was no longer a scandal. It was a story of survival. That night, back in the quiet of the estate, Aaliyah curled on the couch beside her father. The fire crackled softly, casting warm light across their faces. "Daddy," she asked, eyes heavy with sleep, "are the shadows gone now?" Marcus kissed her forehead, brushing back her curls. "Yes, sweetheart. The shadows are gone." Outside, the wind rattled the trees. But inside, for the first time in months, the Harrison estate felt like a home again. Yet even as peace returned, the scars remained. And those scars would shape what came next, the aftermath of betrayal, the rebuilding of trust, and the vow of a father who had finally remembered what mattered most. The Harrison estate stood quiet in the days that followed. The once cold halls now hummed with a fragile sense of peace, though the walls still carried echoes of the storm that had passed. Victoria was gone, escorted from the courthouse in handcuffs. Her name splashed across headlines for fraud and child endangerment. For years, she had crafted a mask of elegance, but the recordings, the documents, and above all, Aaliyah's trembling testimony had torn it away. Her empire of lies collapsed overnight. Marcus sat on the edge of his daughter's bed one morning watching her sleep. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, soft and golden, warming the small curls on her forehead. For the first time in months, she slept deeply without restless turns or whispered pleas. He reached out, brushing her hair back gently. "You're safe now," he whispered. And he meant it. The company, too, felt the shift. At the next board meeting, Marcus walked in not as a distracted CEO, but as a father who had reclaimed his voice. "I built Harrison Global Tech for my family," he told them, his tone firm but calm. "And for a time I lost sight of that. But I will no longer sacrifice my daughter's well-being for quarterly numbers. Effective immediately, I'll be stepping back from daily operations. A trusted team will oversee the company. My first duty is to my child." There were murmurs, some protests, but no one challenged him. They had all seen the headlines. They had all watched the press conference. And deep down, many respected him more for the choice. Back at the estate, Samuel Price continued tending the gardens as if nothing had changed, though everyone knew he had been a silent hero. Marcus found him one evening pruning roses. "I owe you more than I can ever repay," Marcus said quietly. Samuel wiped his hands on his trousers, his weathered face softening. "I didn't do it for you, sir. I did it because no child should cry alone." Marcus swallowed hard, his throat tightening. He extended his hand. "Then let me call you not just my gardener, but my friend." Samuel shook it firmly. "That'll do." As summer deepened, Aaliyah's laughter slowly returned. She played in the garden again, barefoot on the grass, chasing butterflies. She painted bright suns and flowers in her sketchbook, the shadows that once haunted her drawings fading into light. And every night before she drifted to sleep, she would whisper, "Daddy, promise me you'll still be here tomorrow." And Marcus, now free from the chains of boardrooms and betrayals, could finally answer with certainty, "Always, sweetheart. Always." But even peace leaves behind scars, and in those scars lies a message bigger than one family's struggle. A message about love, truth, and the promises we choose to keep. One quiet evening, Marcus found Aaliyah sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, crayons scattered around her. She was bent over a sheet of paper, tongue poking out in concentration. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" he asked gently. She looked up with a shy smile and held up her drawing. Two figures stood hand in hand beneath a golden sun, with rays stretching wide across the page. Beside them, in careful, uneven letters, she had written, "Addie and me safe." Marcus's throat tightened. He knelt beside her, studying the drawing as though it were a masterpiece hung in a gallery. In truth, it was. Because for the first time in a long while there were no dark clouds, no shadowy figures lurking in the corners, only light. He kissed the top of her curls. "It's perfect," he whispered. That night, after tucking her into bed, Marcus lingered at the window. The estate stretched before him, scarred but still standing. Beyond the glass, the gardens Samuel tended swayed gently in the night breeze. And in that moment, Marcus felt something he hadn't in years: clarity. Rachel's portrait hung nearby, her smile forever frozen in paint. Marcus looked at it and spoke softly, as though she could hear. "I kept my promise. Our daughter is safe." The words were not just a vow fulfilled, they were a reminder of what truly mattered. In the end, the story of Marcus and Aaliyah was never about wealth or empires. It was about a child's fragile voice cutting through lies, about a father rediscovering his strength, not in boardrooms, but in love. Fortune can fade. Power can corrupt. But truth once spoken cannot be buried. And love, the fierce, unyielding love of a parent, can outlast every shadow. So when people whispered about the Harrison scandal in years to come, they did not speak of stock prices or courtroom battles. They remembered the moment a little girl raised her voice and was finally believed. And they remembered the father who chose at last to listen. Because in the end, the greatest empire we can ever build is not made of glass towers or gilded halls. It is made of promises kept and of love that refuses to break. At its heart, this story reminds us that true strength is not measured by wealth titles or influence. It's found in the courage to protect what is right and to speak truth even when it feels impossible. Too often people stay silent in the face of injustice, hoping it will pass. But as the saying goes, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. A child's fragile voice and a father's rediscovered love became stronger than lies, power, and fear. That is a lesson we can all carry to stand up for ourselves, to defend those who cannot defend themselves, and to never let silence become complicity. What about you? Have you ever witnessed or experienced moments where truth finally broke through prejudice? Share your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a like if it touched you, and subscribe for more powerful stories that challenge and inspire. Wishing you peace, warmth, and hope beyond the storms of life.